Meeting 2 of the Standing Committee on Education will come to order. Clerk, call the roll.
Senator Carroll. Senator Givens. Senator Higdon. Senator Meredith. Senator Neal. Senator Rawlings.
Present.
Senator Reed.
Here.
Senator Thomas.
Here.
Senator Williams.
Here, but not accounted for.
Senator Wilson. Senator Wise. Vice Chair Tishner.
Present.
Chair West.
Here. We have a quorum. We are duly constituted to conduct business. Normal Education Committee announcements. Please silence your cell phones. No signs allowed in the committee rooms. If you wish to speak for or against a measure, please sign up at the sign-up sheet in the back of the room. You will not be allowed to speak unless you sign up on the sign-up sheet. Do we have any members with introductions or special guests? Senator Thomas.
Thank you, Chairman West. I have two introductions. First of all, I have someone shadowing me today. I know with the new location where the chamber is, we're limited in terms of what we can do about visitors. But I do have someone shadowing me today and seeing how the legislature operates. Mr. Ed Brown, if he'll stand up. Oh, there he is. Okay, he's already standing up. Okay, Ed. Thank you for being here. And as always, at every education committee meeting, I have teachers from Fayette County come and observe what we do here in the legislature. And I have teachers today from both Beaumont Middle School and Takes Creek High School. And I would ask that they stand and be welcome here today. Please stand. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
You're welcome. Any other members with special guests or introductions? Seeing none, first up on the agenda, we have my co-chair, Senator Tishner, will be presenting SB 181, an act relating to schools and declaring an emergency. Senator Tishner, you're no stranger to this committee, so make sure your green light's on, state your name for the record, and proceed.
Senator Lindsay Titchener, District 6.
Could you pull that microphone a little closer?
I talk with my hands, so sometimes I hit it. Thank you, Chairman West, and I'm looking forward to presenting this bill. Senate Bill 181, maybe you've heard of it, maybe not. It's a simple little bill. I want to first go over a little history of Senate Bill 181 to remind the general public and all of us here how this legislation came about. Talk about some of the changes that we've made as well, and obviously the importance of and significance of this legislation. So Senate Bill 181, although originally was filed in 2024, started moving in 2025 legislative session. It creates a system of traceable communications within our school districts to prevent those in a position of authority to have private communications with students. The bill passed out of the Senate Families and Children Committee and onto the Senate floor, where it passed unanimously on March the 4th. Then it moved to the House Families and Children Committee and passed out of the House with unanimous support as well, and then onto the governor's desk, where it was signed into law. It's a common sense piece of legislation, as proved by its unanimous support, that puts necessary boundaries into place to close off the most easily accessible access point to our children. Although the grooming of children can happen outside of electronic communications, recent data shows that near 90% of cases of sexual misconduct and grooming happen through this method. Like several pieces of legislation that we pass here in the General Assembly, once bills are implemented, they often need to be tweaked. And Senate Bill 181 was one of those pieces of legislation. Once it was enacted into law, it revealed some problems within the implementation process, and that's why we're here today. Since the law was officially enacted, I've heard nothing but support on the intent of this legislation. Unfortunately, I've become aware of many more cases that have happened as people shared their stories with me once this broke the news. Taking into consideration suggestions from boots on the ground, our teachers, our principals, superintendents, parents, family members, and also meeting with a collective group of all of the stakeholders within education, the education space, and Chairman West. We met with KDE, EPSB, KEA, CASA, CAS, CAPE, and probably some others. It was a very large meeting, and we brought together a lot of ideas and were able to come up with some solutions that I think will meet the needs to make this bill effective but not lose its intent. The changes that we have made and worked on reflect all of the suggestions that have come my way, but with every consideration and change to this legislation, I've first run it by the victims because I want to make sure the integrity and the intent of this bill is upheld. Unfortunately, since the implementation of 181, several more stories have come to light across districts throughout our state, which I hope will further resolve us as a legislative body to keep working on the issue until it is no longer an issue in our schools. Kentucky is one of the few states across the nation that are leading the charge, and in doing so, we're bringing light to the expanse of this problem, which I hope will help us turn the corner on this issue. Before I get into the specific changes, you have a committee sub. We need to adopt the sub?
You read my mind. Before we adopt the sub, can you just
Run through the changes?
briefly describe?
Absolutely.
Every member has a copy of the sub in your packet.
Absolutely, absolutely. Before I do that, if you don't mind, I wanted to go over some of the EPSB data. I reached out to them in early January and just asked, how has this gone for you? As you know, within the legislation, mandatory reporting is required for certified staff to be reported to EPSB. So I was curious to know, have they been bombarded? What has that looked like? Even though we haven't made any changes, how did that affect the Office of EPSB and how many investigations did they need to make? So as of January 6th, there were 82 total complaints that came through since June 27th when it was enacted into law. 35 of those 82 required some level of investigations. 21 of those cases were closed. 8 have been before the EPSB and sent for further investigation and review, and 8 are pending EPSB review right now. So they did dismiss the majority of those cases, and I believe that has to do with some of the things that we fixed in our bill. We're not going to see those types of cases come before the EPSB anymore as we look through the changes. So let me go through the changes. We really looked at tweaking the definitions that we had in place, making sure our family member definition was broadened to include cousins, blood relatives, relatives by marriage as well, adopted parents, and adopted family members. And also we got our parental definition in line with the FERPA guidelines and that federal definition that our schools already abide by. We made a few changes to the definition of unauthorized electronic communications, and you have to meet all of these in order for it to be considered unauthorized. It would mean that it is a private communication, which is a direct one-on-one communication or a small group that's only accessible to those members and is not traceable. It is unauthorized if it's with a student enrolled in the district. That was a question that we had. Does this pertain to every district? The logistics of that clearly couldn't work, so we've tailored it to students who are enrolled within that same district. It's unauthorized if it's by a school district employee or qualified school volunteer, and I'll get to that definition here in a bit. Unauthorized if it's not a family member or it's outside of a designated traceable system of communication, or if it's without previous parental consent. We made a few exemptions to unauthorized communications that broadened the scope of how students could be communicating with those in authority. We have exempted virtual school instruction, electronic translation services, calling or texting a phone number provided by the parent. So if a student accidentally picks up the home phone or a parent's cell phone and they call, that would be exempted. Communications with a parent included as a recipient. So having those parents along with the student in any communication. Voice communications on a telephone number affiliated with the school. Social media posts and comments that are public. Again, this is specifically tailored to address the private communications. Commercial communications, so if one of our employees at a school or volunteer at our school has a second job and they may inadvertently be in contact with a student because of that job. Secure healthcare messaging and communications involving an emergency situation. So who is subject to the communications restrictions? Parents obviously are not subject, and we already talked about that FERPA definition coming into line. Family members are not subject to it. School volunteers, let me spend a few minutes talking about this. We brought in that definition to make sure we allowed our school districts to have discretion if they have a volunteer that comes in for a minimal amount of time. What we're after are those people who have continual repeated access to students, if they're a coach, if they're a non-paying coach, assistant coach, non-faculty sponsor of an extracurricular activity. Qualified school volunteers also bring in school-sponsored academic tutors or anyone that the Board of Education decides to designate. So if they have a parent that goes on one field trip, the board can decide if they want to grab them into that qualified school volunteer definition and require them to use a traceable form of communication. Okay, I'm almost done. It's been a lot of work. A few changes to the parent's right to written consent. It permits a written parental consent form to designate more than one individual. This was a concern I had from coaches who have a large team and a large coaching staff. So parents, if their student is participating in a certain sport, they could list multiple people on one exemption form. It only permits written consent to be revoked by the parent who filed a consent, requires that the employee or volunteer be notified if their consent form has been revoked, prohibits schools from rejecting or denying valid consent forms, so they have to accept that, and it prohibits compelling consent as a requirement to participate in an academic, athletic, or extracurricular opportunity. I think that was a really important addition. And just a few more things regarding the mandatory reporting, and then I'll wrap up. It requires a reasonable belief of another's violation that has not been previously reported or self-reported to trigger that mandatory reporting duty. And it also changes that mandatory reporting for disciplinary action against an employee or school volunteer that's permissible instead of mandatory, which was a heavy burden on our staff at our schools, specifically when we saw from EPSB that a lot of those cases were immediately dismissed. And I'll take questions if there are any.
Excellent presentation. We'll do a little bit of housekeeping first.
Mm-hmm.
Is there a motion to adopt the sub to SB 181? We have a motion from Senator Rawlings. We have a second from Senator Williams. All those in favor of adopting the sub to SB 191 say aye. Aye. Opposed, nay. Ayes have it. Sub is adopted. We're going to go out of order a little bit. Mm-hmm. We have one individual signed up to speak for. If you'll just stay at the table.
Sure.
We'll bring her forward. Laura Koppelman, if you would come to the table. Senator Tishner can help you there. Just make sure your green light's on, state your name for the record, and then the floor is yours.
Thank you. My name is Laura Wills Koppelman. I want to begin by saying this clearly. This bill responds to one of the most common tools used in grooming, unauthorized and private communication. I'm working with survivors whose abuse began through platforms like Snapchat, and this bill would have interrupted this behavior early. Today, I want to talk about what happens after a concern is raised, because that's the point that often determines if a student is actually protected. In my own case, I tried to do what families and students are told to do. Concerns were reported through the appropriate channels. We went up the ladder. My parents were heavily involved. There was documentation, repeated follow-up, and still nothing was done. This is because the process never left the institution. As I've begun working alongside other survivors across districts and decades, I've heard the same story again and again. Different schools, different year, same results. This is the point where the system usually fails students. Parental notification at the outset of a noted violation is important, but on its own, it isn't a safeguard against an inherent conflict of interest. When concerns are handled internally, the focus can quietly shift from student safety to protecting reputations, relationships, or institutional standing. Under this bill, investigations involving classified employees and qualified student volunteers remain internal, where those pressures still exist. In cases where a violation is reported and an internal investigation results in no disciplinary action, one practical safeguard would be this: parents should receive a written explanation of that decision. Decisions that affect student safety should be defensible, documented, and reviewable by all impacted parties. If we want this bill to do what it's meant to do, we also have to examine how institutions respond when concerns are raised, and acknowledge that too often protection of a reputation can take precedence over protecting children. Thank you so much for giving me the opportunity to speak today.
Thank you so much for your presentation. We will now open it up to questions. Senator Reed is first up.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And I want to thank you for coming in and testifying today. It takes a lot of courage to do that, and I appreciate, we've really undervalued our parents in raising our kids, and anything that we can do to bring the power back to them and empower them to do what's right for their kids is I'm 100% behind. I did have a question. We're really through to Senator Tichenor. Senate Bill 181, coaches. I know you probably talked about it a little bit, but I've been getting pinged on it. The ability for coaches to informally interact with student athletes and their recruiting profiles. Did you go over that already? Because if not, I'd like to hear a little bit more, like liking, sharing, commenting to reinforce what athletes have claimed. That's a big part of their recruiting ability. And I know there's a fine line to walk on that, but I'd like to hear your part on that.
Yeah, there was never an intent for it to hurt that area. Obviously, social media is what it is, and that's how our athletes are getting noticed. As long as it's public, and if there's ever an instance that it can't be, the parents can write a consent form for those communications to the coach.
Okay. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
You're welcome. Senator Carroll.
Back when this bill came out, and a lot of the questions that came and a lot of the concerns, and I know you took note of all of those. What are the remaining concerns from last year's bill that this does not address?
I feel like I've gone through this with a fine-tooth comb. I'm not quite sure. I've been in communication just today, and we'll possibly see an amendment that comes through regarding this issue with DPPs and SROs and the relationships that they have with students who maybe don't have a parent or a family member that is able to be involved in their lives, and parent that can't give consent for those communications. So I'm considering possibly adding that DPPs and SROs could have, along with a counselor or someone else, an administrator in the building, could have those communications if a student is in need and needs to reach out to that SRO or DPP.
Okay. And I'm looking at one of the complaints that I got last time, and this had to do with a mother and daughter that actually operated a photography business where they do senior photos.
Right.
And, under what was in previous language, they would be unable to contact their customers.
We did address that. So in one of the exemptions, if they have, their phone is affiliated for a commercial use outside of their position in the school. So for people who have those second jobs, or obviously the photography would fall under that.
And I'm sure, like everyone else, the biggest issues have been related to athletic teams or other types of teams
Yeah.
within the schools and those communications. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Senator Neal.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. First of all, this seems to be a thoughtful revisit to this legislation. I'm glad to see that people who are knowledgeable in the area had come together and did a relook and came up with some of the options here, and I support those options. I have a question, though, particularly based upon the question was raised here. What would be the hesitancy or the construct upon which there might be parental notification?
How would they be informed
Yeah,
of a violation?
yeah.
The school would inform the parent.
So in terms of the outcome, in terms of actions that are taken or not taken, all that would be made available?
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
Any other members?
I'm sorry.
You have another question, Senator?
To the parent.
Yes.
That's all.
You good? Okay. Any other senators have questions on this piece of legislation? I just have a couple quick. Oh, Senator Higdon, sorry.
Senator Tishner, thank you for this, and this is a teachable moment. You've heard of that.
I have.
I haven't.
Once or twice.
Yeah, Senator Givens coined that phrase, not I. My coined phrase was "simple little bill."
Yes. This is not a simple little bill.
Well, you know, just again, teachable moment. And there's a lot of folks that watch what we do. A lot of people looked at this legislation. It went through the process last time. And, you know, I didn't hear anything from anybody as this was going through the process. And again, we have a lot of watchdogs. A lot of people pay attention to what we do. You introduced the bill on February 14th, Valentine's Day. It passed out of the Senate on March the 6th. Went over to the House and passed out of the House on March 28th, signed by the governor on April the 1st, and we didn't hear a peep out of anybody till mid-July, and all hell broke loose then.
Yeah.
But anyway, just note to self what we do. You know, we do have a lot of watchdogs, and this, as you've corrected all the things that people have concerns about. It's much better if we get those concerns while we're in session. We have time to correct them, rather than when we're not in session and we can't do a thing about it. The schools, you know, it's law; they have to implement it. But so this process is important that people pay attention and bring concerns to us as they see them. And I appreciate you listening to all those concerns and getting and bringing this bill forward to correct. So, Mr. Chairman, thank you. I didn't want to take up too much time, but it is important to make that known.
Thank you. And I will say of all the concerns that came through, a lot of it was prior to the start of the school year, and a lot of possibly misinterpretation of the language. And as the school year got started, the complaints died down quite a bit, but there were clearly some concerns that still needed to be addressed. So I think we worked through some of the issues on their own, and they became non-issues, but we've dealt with the ones that continue to cause trouble.
I'm going to wrap us up. I have a quick question and a couple comments. Are you suggesting and saying that your initial bill wasn't the perfect bill to solve this problem?
I have a hard time admitting that, but I think I might have to admit that.
That never happens here.
It never happens.
So I just want to commend you for your work on this subject matter. It is slippery. It is hard to draft a bill to handle every situation, which is what you were trying to do. It's almost impossible. But you handled everything the right way. We didn't have the perfect bill last year. but you met, I was in the meetings with you met with all the K groups, brought in all the stakeholders, listened to what they had to say, and reacted accordingly. Another thing I'd like to state is this bill is a reaction to a very serious problem in the state of Kentucky.
Yes.
There's an epidemic of sexual misconduct in our school systems. And all you have to do is read the paper for the past 2 to 3 years to get an inkling of what's going on. And what you see in the newspaper is probably just the tip of the iceberg.
Yeah.
Okay? So we have serious sexual misconduct. We have grooming going on. We have unauthorized communications with students without the consent of their parents. And the legislature's had to step in. And I just personally want to say thank you for your attempt at addressing, and I want to say thank you for the guest and bringing your testimony. Secondly, before we vote, sort of going back to some of Senator Higdon's comments, we heard crickets until July, and then the media was breathlessly reporting all of these problems across the state that various districts may or may not be having. Okay? So that was on the front page of the newspapers and that sort of thing. So here we have today a bill in Senate Education Committee. And if you've noticed, the front row here, where the media should be normally, is empty. So sometimes we like to report on the things that get clicks, but when there's an actual legislative solution, not so much. So I just want to thank you for what you've done and appreciate all your efforts in this area.
Thank you so much.
Up now, do we have a motion on SB 181? Senator Williams has made a motion. Senator Reed has a second. Please call the roll.
Senator Carroll.
Explain my aye vote, Mr.
Please
Chairman.
proceed.
I came into this meeting with the intent to vote no. I was not going to go down that road again. Your bill was very unpopular in my district, and I heard about it quite often. I do appreciate the intent. I'm not going to commit to voting on the floor. I want to study this further, and I want to hear from those within my district. But I absolutely do appreciate the intent and the work that you put into this. And it's just a sad state when we have to go this far as a legislature to do what parents should be doing. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Senator Givens. Senator Higdon. Senator Meredith.
Explain my aye vote, Mr. Chair.
Please proceed.
Certainly echo Senator Higdon's comments earlier, but a very wise, very sage legislator told me one time that every bill we pass has unintended consequences, and this one certainly falls under that category. But I think that's every piece of legislation that we pass here. So 181 was not really a poor bill or incomplete bill. It just, you can't anticipate everything that's going to occur. And as explained during the process, it was crickets until it came out, and then it kind of exploded. But that's okay, because we want to hear from our constituents, and this is just part of the process. So this is just to fix those unintended consequences, and I commend you for that. Thank you.
Senator Neal.
Aye.
Senator Rawlings.
Aye.
Senator Reed.
Aye.
Senator Thomas.
Mr. Chair, I'd like to explain my aye vote.
Please proceed.
Mr. Chair, in my view, and Senator Tishner, this may not be a simple bill, but to me, it's a very simple concept. Because to me, this bill is all about boundaries. You know, I talk to my children about that. When we have our sexual harassment training, we talk about boundaries. You know, there are boundaries in life in every respect as an adult. You know, I'm looking at my interns now, and there are boundaries that I expect to have with practice and practice with them. So it's all about boundaries. And I can see Senator Reed's point, which makes a good point. If you have a coach-player relationship and you've got this outstanding high school athlete who's decided, coach, should I go to U of L? Should I go to UK? He wants to talk to that coach at 8:30 at night. I don't have a problem with that. because there's that special relationship there, and what they're talking about is what's the best decision for the athlete. That's not breaching any boundaries, in my opinion. I will say on the commercial point, if you've got a teacher who's doing some work with photographer, I think that point was raised by one of my colleagues here. I would question why the teacher is calling the student rather than the parent. I'm going to tell you that. If they've got an issue about doing business, the teacher ought to be calling the adult, not the student. But to me, this bill's all about boundaries, and we should have boundaries, and we do have boundaries in life. And so for that reason, I do support this bill.
Senator Tishner,
Aye.
Senator Williams,
I'd like to explain my aye vote.
Please proceed.
Technology. We're all getting used to technology, and if this bill is perfect in the way it handles technology today, it probably won't be next year. Okay, because technology evolves, it changes. We have to monitor this. But it wasn't perfect when it was passed before. But the one thing I find comfort in, some of my districts had no problem with this. They dealt with the issues, no problems, and others didn't. Obviously, we had a lot of complaints. But what I'm comforted by is it sounds like there's at least 8 of our children out there, maybe 16 of our children out there in the last 6 months that have had somebody looking over their situation that are potential abuse. 16 kids, certainly 8. That is worth what we did a year ago for those kids. And we worked out the details, so some of the situations that wouldn't have resolved like that, but that hopefully in the next 6 months we will continue to help those 8, those 16s, and in the long run it just dwindles down because we weed out the abusers who we know are persistent if we don't get rid of them. Thank you. I vote aye.
Senator Wilson,
Explain my vote, Mr. Chairman.
Please proceed.
First of all, this is one of the bills that I had some of the most complaints about, especially from my school districts, which I have several. And I continually told them that the sponsor was listening and receiving from everybody. And I think, Senator Tishner, you did a great job of listening to every concern that people had and coming back with this bill. And so I want to commend you, and I vote yes. Thank you.
Senator Wise,
Explain my vote.
Please proceed.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Senator Tishner, echo the same comments. I'm probably going to say some more when we get this bill on the floor of praising you. I know a lot of times when we pass legislation, it's also not just a legislative process, but it also is a legislator learning along the way and being open to listening and changes. I will say I even had a meeting yesterday with somebody from Warren County who said on this bill, Senator Wise, I love what we've done with Senate Bill 181 because the school districts came up with a great communication device to communicate directly with the parents. I'd want to thank all those school districts that are really being creative and coming up with some great ways to be able to do this of the intent and the following through. But once again, thank you for the changes that you made, and I look forward to supporting this bill on the floor. Thank you.
Chair West,
So I'll explain my vote. I wish we didn't have to be here. Senator Tishner probably wishes we didn't have to be here. We didn't have a need for this bill. But as stated earlier, there's clearly an epidemic out there, and this issue has to be addressed. I want to thank you for your good work and, like everyone has stated, listening to all the stakeholders in this. I proudly vote aye. Senate Bill 181 passes 12-0 with favorable expression. This is the only bill to come in front of our committee today. We finished in plenty of time, which is unheard of. Do we have any other business from any member to come before the committee? Seeing none.